Hello everyone and welcome back to our World History PYQ series for UPSC Mains. So today it will be our session 6 and today we are going to discuss two questions from past year papers. So what are those two questions that we are going to discuss for today? So the first question is that came in the year 2023 itself, that it's a 10 marker, so both the questions are of 10 marks each only. So the first question is that bring out the socio-economic effects of the introduction of railways in different countries of the world. And the second question is that Africa was chopped into states artificially created by accident of European competition. Analyze. So these are the two questions that we are going to discuss in today's session. So let's start. So the first question is that bring out the socio-economic effects, or rather bring out what? Now bring out the socio-economic effects of the introduction of railways in different countries of the world. So as we discussed that it's a 10 marker question that came in the year 2023. But before we even think about writing, we need to decode what the examiner is really asking for. So the first step in deconstruction or the decoding of the question is that we need to identify the core theme. So in this case, so what is the core theme over here? The core theme here is simple, that how railways changed society and economy across the world. So this is the core theme for this particular question. So this particular question isn't a question about the history of railways or how they work. It's about the transformation, that exactly what change happened when railways arrived. Say for example, we can think of examples like that we can think of these examples, that Britain during the Industrial Revolution, or USA's westward expansion, or Japan's Meiji modernization, or India's colonial economic integration, or Africa's resource extraction. So we can think of these particular examples that based on when railways came, so what were the changes that had happened. So now this is the core theme of this particular question. So now let us break down each phrase of this particular question, because as we all know that every word in a UPSC question matters. So what is the first keyword over here, or what are the key phrases that has been used in this particular question? First is bring out. Now what exactly does this term means? Because in the question it's clearly mentioned that bring out what? Now bring out clearly mentioned that bring out the socio-economic effect. So that means, so what exactly does this term bring out means? So what exactly it means? Now bring out is nothing but it clearly highlights the major effects. So over here, they are not asking us to write about the history of railways, but we need to show the changes they caused. So that is what the main theme of this particular question, that what were the changes? We need to clearly highlight the major changes that railways means once the railways came into the picture, what were the changes that had happened. So for example, like railways accelerated urban growth by connecting the factory towns in Britain. Similarly, the next part is the socio-economic effects. So what were the socio-economic effects over here? Now in this particular part, we must cover both the social as well as the economic changes. So we should not write only about economy or only about social changes. For example, the social change example we can give like the migration patterns in USA, or the economic example we can give like that the market integration in India. So these are few of the examples. Next key phrase is the introduction of railways. So what exactly does this term means? So it focuses on that when railways first entered countries, that is on the 19th century, and how they became the turning points. So that is what the question, or that is what this particular phrase means, that the introduction of railways. So over here we can give some examples like that Japan built railways rapidly after 1868 to modernize. Next part is the different countries of the world. So different countries of the world means what? What does this, why they have given this particular statement, or why they have used this particular phrase in the question? Now this is crucial because we cannot write a one country answer. Say for example, you cannot write your answer based on only for Britain or USA or any other country. So we need global examples like Britain, USA, Japan, India, African colonies, etc. So I hope you understood that these are the clear phrases that has been used in the question and what exactly each phrase means. So based on this, we need to frame our answer. But next comes the most important thing, that as we all know that every UPSC question has some hidden sub questions. But we need to figure it out that what are those hidden sub questions that has been asked. Now, what do you mean by hidden sub questions? Like which is not directly being asked, but they are expecting you to answer from those aspects as well. Say, for example, in this scenario itself, so in this scenario, what are the hidden sub questions? The first question is that what social changes did railways bring? Because they are asking for the socio-economic impact. So that means what were the social changes that railways had brought? Now you can think about the migration and urbanization point. Like in Britain, workers could easily move to industrial towns. Similarly, in USA, settlers moved west because of railway lines. So these are the points we can mention about migration and urbanization. Next comes cultural or social mixing. Now in India, different communities traveled together, leading to social interaction across the caste lines. So obviously, when people will travel together, the interaction will be across the caste lines. Next is the most important thing is the spread of ideas. Say, for example, Japan's Meiji state used railways and telegraph to spread reforms across the country. So these are the first part of the question. That means this is one of the hidden sub question. Next comes what economic changes did railways bring? Because they are asking for both the socio-economic impact. So we have covered the social impact. Now we need to cover the economic impact as well. So what economic changes did railways brought? Now market integration. Say for example, like wheat from America's Midwest reached eastern ports. Similarly, cotton from Deccan reached Bombay port faster. Next is the industrial growth. Obviously, if interconnectivity or connectivity increases, that means the industrial growth will also happen. So Britain's coal, iron and steel industries expanded because railways needed these materials. Next comes the agricultural commercialization. Now, African railways were used to export minerals and cash crops to Europe. So this is how the railways had brought the economic changes over here. Next comes the most important thing, that whether these particular effects like the social effect or the economic effect were similar everywhere. Now this is where your answer becomes sophisticated. The answer is clearly no. It's not similar everywhere. How come? Say for example, in the industrial nations like Britain and USA, railways supported industrial capitalism and created national markets. Whereas in the modernizing nation like Japan, railways were state planned to speed up what? Now modernization and unify the country. Next comes the colonies like Indian and African colonies. Why railways were built over there? Now railways were built mainly to extract resources. They connected raw material zones to ports, creating outward looking networks. So now you understood, right, that how effect of railways was different in different countries. For example, in the industrial nations like Britain and USA, it supported what? Now it supported industrial capitalism. It supported what? Now it supported industrial capitalism. Second is in the modernizing nations, why railways or what impact that railways had brought is the modernization and unification of the country. Third is in the African and Indian colonies. So what exactly happened over there? Now railways were built mainly to extract the resources. So this is how the impact of railway was different in different countries. Fourthly, that why were railways globally transformative? So why were railways globally transformative? Now they opened new regions. Say for example, USA's West. They helped build modern states like Japan. Third is they integrated colonial economies into global trade. Say for example, India and Africa. They accelerated industrial growth. For example, Britain. So these were few of the hidden sub questions that we need to answer in our whatever answers that we will be writing. So we need to keep these points also in mind. Now, what exactly the examiner is expecting from us? So let me give you some checklists. For example, the examiner is asking or the examiner is expecting what? Now, a short, crisp introduction mentioning railways as a 19th century global revolution. So, and also we need to give a clear socio-economic effects. Not only social impact or not only the economic effect, but both socio-economic effects. Third is the multi-country coverage, like what was the impact globally. like multi-country coverages showing differences between industrial countries, modernizing countries, and colonies, like how we discussed some time back. Next is explain how the impacts differed, as we discussed that impact differed between industrial countries, modernizing countries, and colonies. And finally, in the conclusion, a balanced conclusion about railways as a global transformative force. So this is what the examiner is expecting from us. So now, before I show you what I wrote, let me share something. Now, as we all know that there are multiple ways to write a good introduction for a particular question. Now, for this particular question, I have prepared 4 different types of introduction. Let me explain each one. First is the historical context based. So, what is all this about? Now, this particular type of introduction or the approach, this is best for world history. So, the historical context based, if you write, that is pretty good over here. So, how you can write it over here? Like, we can simply mention that the 19th century witnessed the rapid spread of railways from Britain to Europe, America, and eventually Asia and Africa. As this technology diffused across regions, it generated far-reaching socio-economic changes, though the nature and direction of these impacts varied across countries. So this is how you can write the introduction based on this particular approach. Now, why this works? It immediately establishes the time period and theme of varied impacts. Now, this particular theme or this particular approach is perfect for world history questions. Now, next comes the comparative type, the comparative introduction, because you are comparing. So, how you can write it? Like that though railways originated in industrial Europe, their socio-economic effects differed across the world, accelerating industrial expansion in Britain, enabling continental integration in the USA, aiding state-led modernization in Japan, and serving colonial extraction in India and Africa. So, as we discussed previously, that how the impact of this modernization or the impact of the railways was different in different countries. Like in the industrial nation, like in Britain and USA, the industrial nations, the impact was different. Similarly, in the modernizing nation like Japan, the impact was different. And in the Indian and African colonies, the impact was different. So that is what you are mentioning over here. In the comparative type of introduction, you are mentioning the same thing over here. Now, why this particular type of introduction works? Now, it signals to the examiner right away that you understood the question, which requires showing differences across countries. Now, why I am saying this? So, what now again coming back to the question. So, what the question is asking for, that bring out the socio-economic impacts of the introduction of railways in different countries of the world. So, that means they are expecting you to write your answer based on global impact. So, in the introduction itself, you have started your answer with that particular thought process itself. Next comes the funnel type of introduction. Now, what does this means? Now, funnel type of introduction is nothing but what exactly, how you can write it over here. So, basically, this particular funnel type of introduction is nothing but you are starting with a big picture and then you are narrowing it down. So, this type of introduction is good for setting the context. Now, for this particular question, how you can write this introduction? We can simply write that the 19th century was an age of expanding global connectivity. That means this is the bigger picture, that the 19th century was an age of expanding global connectivity. Within that, railways emerged as one of the most transformative instruments of this change. Now you understood the meaning of funnel, right? So initially you are writing that the 19th century was an age of expanding global connectivity. That means the global connectivity you are mentioning about. And railways, now you are funneling it down, coming down to the particular context. Railways emerged as one of the most transformative instruments of this change. So as different countries adopted rail systems, they experienced significant socio-economic shifts shaped by their unique political and economic contexts. So this is the meaning of this funnel type of introduction. And as I discussed that why this is good or why this particular type of introduction works, because you are setting up the context directly at the beginning of your answer itself. Third part is, or the last type introduction is simple, direct definition or core idea. That means you are directly defining what the context is all about. So over here, what you have mentioned or what we can write like this, that railways as one of the defining innovations of the industrial age reshaped patterns of mobility, trade and social interaction across the world. Now their introduction produced what? Now, profound socio-economic effects that manifested differently across industrial, modernizing, and colonial regions. So over here, you are directly setting up the point. Directly, you are going straight to the point. So why this particular type of introduction may work for these type of questions? Because you are getting straight to the point. Now, these type of answers you can write, or this type of in this approach of writing the introduction you can write when you have paucity of time. So now I hope you understood that what are the different approaches or ways how we can write our introduction. Now let's talk about the body of the answer. So again, there are multiple correct approaches. So there is no one single approach. There are multiple correct approaches. Now for this particular question, I have prepared 4 different structures for you. First one is the thematic or multidimensional. Now, this part is the most balanced and UPSC friendly. So, try to write your answer in a multidimensional manner. So, that will showcase to the examiner that no, this particular aspirant is aware of all the dimensions. First is the social effects. So, in this social effects, what we can write about? Now, in the social effects, we can mention about that urbanization. We can mention about urbanization that Britain saw rapid growth of industrial towns connected by rail networks. Second is migration and mobility. Over here, we can mention that in the USA, railways enabled mass westward migration and settlement. These things already we have discussed. So now we are writing to, or now we are trying to learn the structures, how to structure your answer. Third is the social mixing. Now in India, railways brought people of diverse castes and regions into shared public spaces. Now, spread of ideas. Japan used railways to disseminate Meiji reforms and modern education across provinces. So, this was all about my social effect or the social impact of railways. Now, coming to the economic impact. So, what is all about this economic impact? What are the dimensions we can cover under economic effects? Now, market integration. Railways linked American farms to coastal ports, Indian hinterlands to export hubs like Bombay and Calcutta. Now, industrial expansion. In Britain, coal, iron, and steel industries boomed due to railway demand. Commercial agriculture. African colonies exported cocoa, coffee, and minerals using rail lines built for extraction. Now, national economic unification. Japan's railways unified internal markets and supported state led industrial growth. So, this was all about the economic effect. Now, why this particular type of approach, or why I said that this is the most balanced and the UPSC friendly? Now, over here, you can see, right, that there is a clean separation of social and economic dimensions. So, this particular approach is easy to write and read as well. So, that's why this is the most friendly type of approach you can use. Next is the comparative approach. Now, what does this mean? Comparative approach means you are showing the differences between industrial nations, modernizing states, and colonies, like how we have discussed it previously. So, over here, how to write it? Like we already discussed that the industrial nations like Britain and USA. So, what exactly happened in Britain? Now, railways supported industrial revolution like cheaper transport, expanded coal and steel sectors, rapid urbanization. Next is USA. Now, created a continental economy, connected east-west, enabled mass migration, agricultural export, and new towns. So, this was all about the industrial nations like Britain and USA. Now, what about the modernizing nations like Japan? Railways were state-funded tools of nation building, facilitated modern industries, integrated provinces, and strengthened central authority, unlike the private, profit-driven Western model. So this is about that modernizing nation. Now, what about the colonies like Indian colonies and African colonies? What exactly happened over there? Now, in India, railways linked raw material zones to ports, boosting British trade. Also stimulated Indian nationalism through greater mobility. Now, Africa, railways primarily served extractive interests, transporting minerals and cash crops to European markets with limited internal integration. So this is how you can write it, like the comparative approach. Now, why this particular approach works? Because if you remember in the question, it was directly being asked that different countries of the world, what was the impact of railways in different countries of the world? So with this particular approach, you are directly addressing that particular point, the different countries of the world. And you are showing that how the effects differed based on the country's position in the global economy. Like the industrial nations, capitalism, Britain and USA, the impact was different as compared to the modernizing nation like Japan. And Indian or African colonies, the impact of railways on these colonies were entirely different as compared to the other nations like Britain, USA, and Japan. So, this particular approach, based on this approach, you can directly showcase the differences. Next comes the geographical or regional approach. What exactly it is showing, or what exactly how you can write it down? Like for Europe like Britain and Germany, stimulated the industrial growth and labor mobility. Now, accelerated what? Now, accelerated urbanization and integrated regional markets. Now, next comes North America, like USA and Canada. What exactly happened? Now, it enabled settlement of interior regions. It helped create unified national markets and large-scale agriculture. Now, Asian countries like Japan and India. So, as we have already discussed, that Japan, it supported the Meiji modernization and the centralized state control. And what about India? Now, it facilitated the colonial extraction, but also increased internal mobility and commercial agriculture. So, this was all about this particular approach. And what about Africa? Like railways built for export, oriented mining and plantation economies, limited socio-economic benefits for indigenous populations. So, this was all about this particular approach, the geographical or regional based. Now, why this particular approach works? Because it is very organized. Like you are organizing it based on the regions or geography, like Europe, North America, Asia, Africa. Like this, you are bifurcating or you are segregating your answer. So, this particular approach is very organized, easy to follow. So, that's why this we can write as well. Now, the last and final approach is the chronological approach. So, this is also one way how you can write your answer. Like chronologically, you are writing. So, first is the early phase. Now, railways as industrial stimulus. So, initially it acts as a stimulus. Like in Britain, 1820s to 1850s. What exactly happened? Now, it boosted coal, iron, and machinery production. It enabled factory towns and labor mobility. Now, next comes the expansion phase. So, what exactly happened in the expansion phase? It nation building and continental integration, like in USA, Germany, Japan. And next comes the colonial phase. So, in the colonial phase, what happened? Now, extraction and global market linkage, like in India and Africa. Like in India, railways reoriented economy to export cotton, wheat, and tea. Africa, it transported minerals or cash crops for European industries. And finally, it's the long-term phase. What exactly it means? Now, socio-economic transformations like mobility, urbanization, cultural exchange, nationalism in India, and creation of national economies in USA, Japan, and Germany. So, why this particular type of approach works? Because it shows evolution over time. Because initially you are asking or you are saying about what? Initially you are showing about the early phase, next the expansion phase, next the colonial phase, and finally the long-term phase. So, this is how you are segregating your answer. Now, this particular question, as I discussed, that it is showing the evolution over time. So, this particular approach is good for showing that how railway impacts changed across different periods. Now, which structure should you use? Now, in this, I will show you later when I will show you my answer. But for this particular question, I have used the comparative because the question says that different countries of the world, what was the impact of the railways in different countries of the world? So, I chose the comparative approach. Why? Because I wanted to show the differences clearly. So, that's why I have given or I have used that comparative approach over here. Now, I hope you understood the introduction part and the body part. Now, finally, let's look at the conclusion. Now, again, over here also, we are having multiple correct approaches. As I mentioned, as I am saying repeatedly, that there is no one single approach. First is the significance-based approach. So, what exactly it means? Now, significance-based approach is nothing but you are mentioning. So, what exactly you can write for this particular approach? Like, that the railways became one of the most transformative forces of the 19th century, reshaping how societies interacted, how economies functioned, and how states consolidated power. Their impact across countries illustrates how a single technology could redirect global economic and social trajectories. So, this is the significance based. Like, what were the impact of the railways? What was the significance of it? So, basically, in this particular approach, you are emphasizing on the historical importance. Next comes the long-term consequences. So, what is this about? The long-term consequences. Now, in the long run, what exactly happened? Now, in the long run, railways helped create national markets, accelerated industrial capitalism, enabled internal integration of emerging states, and connected colonies to world trade. Their legacy continues in modern transport networks that underpin today's globalized economy. So, this is the long term consequences. So, this is a forward looking approach. Why this particular approach works? Because it reinforces the comparative theme, adds analytical depth about the uneven development. Because, as we had already discussed, that the impact was not same across the globe, it was uneven. So, that's why this particular approach also works. Now, next is the comparative insight. So over here, what exactly we are doing or what exactly we are showing over here. Now in the comparative insight is we are comparing like across the world, railways produced a shared experience of greater mobility and economic expansion. Yet the nature of these benefits differed sharply, stimulating industrial strength in the West, facilitating modernization in Japan, and deepening colonial extraction in Asia and Africa. Now, this diversity captures the uneven character of global historic change. So, this is also another way how you can write the answer. Now, next part is the positive ended, that is the forward looking type approach. What is that? Now, despite their varied purposes, from industrial growth to colonial control, railways ultimately laid the foundations for future connectivity, mobility, and national integration in many regions. They remain symbols of economic opening and social transformation across the world. So, why this particular approach works? Because you are ending your answer in a forward-looking, optimistic note. So that's why this particular approach is also, this particular approach also works over here. Next comes, and the final approach is the synthesis or summary based. So what does this means? It means you are summarizing your entire answer as a part of conclusion. So how you can write it like this, that overall the spread of railways triggered far-reaching socio-economic changes, though shaped by each region's political and economic setting. Their introduction stands out as a defining marker of 19th century global transformation. Why this particular approach works? Because this particular approach is simple, clean wrap up without being repetitive. So you are just wrapping up your answer. So I hope you understood that what are the different types of approaches that we can use for this particular answer. But now the big question comes that which method should you choose? So as I mentioned previously that there is no one single correct approach. All the approaches are correct. But how you can, so how based on what you need to choose? You need to choose the approach that will make you comfort. So based on your comfort level, you need to choose your approach. Next is the time you have. How much time you have to write that particular answer. So based on that only, you need to choose the approach. Next is what feels most natural to your writing skill. So this is all about that, how natural or what exactly you can write based on that particular approach. So based on these three things, you can pick the approach based on which you can write your answer. So I will repeat the same thing again, that there is no single approach or there is no single correct approach. All the approaches are correct only, but based on these three things like your comfort level, the time you have, what feels most natural to your writing skill. So based on these three part, you can decide that which approach you need to follow. So now comes, so I have shown you multiple options or multiple approaches. Now I will show you that what exactly I had written and what's the feedback that I had got for my answer. So out of all these options I just showed you, here's what I actually wrote over here. So what exactly I wrote, I will show you. So the question was that bring out the socio-economic impact or bring out the socio-economic effects of the introduction of railways in different countries of the world. So this was the question. So now what exactly I have written? Now as part of my introduction, I have mentioned that the coming of railways in the 19th century became a symbol of modernity and transformed economies and societies across the world. So based on just a historical, or you can say that it's a definition only, based on that only I had written the introduction part of my answer. Next comes the economic effects. So as I mentioned that I have followed this approach where I have mentioned about the social effect and the economic effect. So based on that only I have written. So what was the economic effects I have written? That Now, Britain. So in Britain, what I have written that it stimulated industrialization, linked factories to ports, reduced freight cost. In the USA, what I have written that connected east-west coasts, opened western lands, encouraged trade and urban growth. Now next comes the Russia. So under Russia, what are the things I have mentioned? I have mentioned about the Trans-Siberian Railway, integrated vast territories, spurred mining and agriculture. Next is India, aided British trade, raw materials out, finished goods in. That means the raw materials were exported and the finished goods were imported. It unified the markets but drained wealth. Next comes Africa. So as part of Africa, what I have mentioned that served colonial extraction and plantation exports. Next is Japan. So what I have mentioned, now it supported Meiji industrialization and modern trade links. So these are the economic impacts I have mentioned over here. Next comes the social effects. So what are the things I have mentioned under social effects? Now, Britain and USA. It encouraged what? Now, encouraged urbanization and labor migration. New towns emerged. Russia unified distant ethnic groups across Siberia. Now, India, what I have mentioned over here, now it broke regional isolation but reinforced social hierarchy through job segregation. Now, next, what I have mentioned that spread of newspapers, education, and ideas along railway routes globally. In colonies, benefits were uneven, often deepening inequality. Now, as part of my conclusion, what I have mentioned that railways transformed the world, driving growth, social change, and integration. Yet, while industrial nations gained progress, colonies faced exploitation and uneven development. So, this was my answer. Now, I will show you that what feedback I have got. So, as part of my introduction, what is the feedback that I had got? That it's a decent intro. So, but the mistakes that I had made that I will show you. See, I have mentioned only economic effects. I have mentioned that only the heading, the economic effects. But what feedback I have got that write the full heading. Like over here, I could have written that the economic effects of railways or economic effects of the introduction of railways. So like that. So this part I need to so these are the mistakes I have made. Okay, so this is one of the mistake I had made. So you can learn from these mistakes. Next, so these are all the points, whatever points that and one of the major mistake I have made that over here in India I have mentioned that it aided what? The British trade, raw materials out and finished goods in. But they are asking me to write some more positive impact. Because most of the time, most of the things I have mentioned some negative impacts. But they are asking me to write more on the positive impacts as well. Some more things on the positive side as well. So what exactly worked well for this? So what exactly worked well for my answer? Now, from the feedback that I had received, so what exactly worked well? Now, clear comparative structure showing differences across regions. So as I had already shown you that I have clearly shown the differences across the regions like India, Africa, USA, Britain, all those things, Russia. Next is good use of specific examples. Like I have mentioned, see, I will show you again that over here I have mentioned about this thing. Correct. Say for example, this one, that Trans-Siberian Railway. So I have given some examples over here. So that's what they are mentioning that. So this is one of the positive thing that I had received or I had done for this particular question. That good use of certain specific examples. Next is the balanced coverage of both social and economic effects. So as I had shown you that I have given the social effect as well as the economic effect as well. Now, what could have been better? So this is the most important thing. Based on this only, we can improve our answers. So first of all, more specific data. Now, what does this means? Now, I could have mentioned specific railway lines like the Transcontinental Railroad in USA or the first Indian railway from Bombay to Thane. Now, specific examples will make my answer more credible. So that's why as a feedback I have got that I need to give more specific examples. Now, second is deeper social analysis. Now, what does this means? Now, while I mentioned about social mixing in India, I could have elaborated on how railways created new social spaces as well. Say, for example, waiting rooms, compartments, where traditional hierarchies were challenged. Now, this would have shown deeper understanding. So that's why they have mentioned about this. Next is the environmental impact or the ecological impact that had happened. Now, I completely missed out this particular dimension. Now, railways, what exactly happened? Now, railways transformed landscapes, forests were cleared, new settlements emerged, wildlife habitats were disrupted. Adding one line about this would have shown multi-dimensional thinking, which I missed it over here. So that's why they are asking us, that's why they were asking me to add a particular line on this particular dimension as well. Next is the gender dimension. Now, railways created new employment opportunities for women in some countries, like ticket sellers in Britain, but also new vulnerabilities as well. Say, for example, the safety concerns for women travelers in India. Now, this angle also I have missed in my answer. And the most important thing is better transition sentence. So, better transition sentences means what? Now, my paragraphs could have been better connected. Now, instead of just jumping from Britain to USA, now I will show you. Like over here, if you see in my answer, first I have mentioned about Britain, like right. First I have mentioned about Britain and then only I have mentioned about USA as well. So instead of this, I could have written that while Britain used railways to consolidate its industrial dominance, the United States deployed them for a different purpose, the continental expansion. So these were the feedbacks that I had received. And overall, how much marks I had got? Now, for this particular question, I have got 4.25 out of 10. So it's a not so good, but yeah, okay, fine. That's okay. I can improve or we can improve from here as well. So this was all about this particular question. I hope you understood this particular question. Now in the next session, we will discuss the next question. I was supposed to discuss two questions today itself, but this particular question only it took so long time. So it's better we discuss the next question in the next session. I hope you are getting all this particular how to deconstruct the questions and all. So okay, fine then. So we'll discuss the next question in the next session. So till then, work hard, study more. Thank you.